Let's review evictions and the disposal of personal property after an eviction here in Nevada. Remember that in Nevada, it always starts with some kind of a notice that has to be processed, served, and posted on the door or handed to the tenant. One of the types of notices is called a 5-day notice for failure to vacate, otherwise known as an unlawful detainer. You post a 30-day notice for no cause. The tenant remains in the property. The landlord chooses not to accept the rent and have them continue. You post the 5-day notice. Another 5-day notice is for a violation of the lease. They have 5 days to correct the violation or quit. Non-payment of rent for residential is going to be a 7-day pay or quit. For commercial, it's a 5-day pay or quit. And then finally, there's a 3-day nuisance. Here's what the process looks like in a graphic form. This is provided by the Nevada courts. The landlord serves a notice to which the tenant can then either vacate the property or pay. If they fail to vacate or pay, the tenant may or may not file an answer with the court. The landlord could then file the complaint with the court for the eviction. If the tenant doesn't file an answer, an eviction order can be granted, and then they would send that to the constable. If the tenant does file an answer with the court, they would schedule a hearing, and depending on the outcome of the hearing, will determine the next steps. But let's keep going the road of they didn't file an answer, the order was granted, and the constable was sent the notice. The landlord would then pay the constable to perform the lockout. The constable then puts a notice on the tenant's door. They could still file a motion to stay or appeal at that time. If not, the constable would have them vacate the premises. If there's a hearing granted and scheduled, they can either grant the eviction or deny it. The landlord still has the opportunity to do what's known as a formal eviction, even if they're denied the summary eviction. If the tenant were to vacate the property during that notice period, the landlord could then take back possession of the property without going to court. They would then have to store the belongings of the tenant for 30 days. You must inventory, then store the belongings. You would then be able to send in the last 14 days a notice saying you intend to dispose of that personal belongings. I recommend you have a video done as soon as the lockout is done, get photos, do an inventory, and then understand you're going to have to store that belongings. For commercial, they still do the lockout and they can immediately post a 14-day notice without having to wait for the full 30 days. In both cases, they would send it to the last known address. Hope that helps you remember the eviction process here in Nevada.